Fantastic. So we're going to start off with our first offer, and this is an offer that I'm sort of well known for, where we're going to fly you into Chicago. So spend 2 nights in Chicago. Have you ever been to Chicago?
I have.
You might as well tell me about Chicago then.
Well, I'm not nearly the expert on Chicago as I am in Alaska, but I've always enjoyed my time there a lot.
Kind of, obviously, we've got guests in there for 2 days. What type of things would they be looking to do?
Oh boy, I'm not the one to ask. It sounds like you've done it a lot more than I.
Well, kind of, from my point of view, obviously shopping's very, very good in Chicago. It's known as the Windy City. As one thing you must do is try and take in a Cubs game if they're actually playing. There's the observation deck, and it's also very cultural. So they've got a lot of museums, and the #1 rated event on TripAdvisor is the Art Institute. Have you been there?
I have not. I've been to the Sears Tower. I know the Sears Tower.
Is the Sears Tower cool?
Sears Tower is cool. It's or it was. I'm not sure if it still holds the title of the tallest building east of the Mississippi.
Wow, great to know. So after you've done your 2 nights there, we're then going to put you on Amtrak. So Amtrak is a working train. It's like British Rail, to be fair, but it's slightly better than that because what they have is roomettes. And what we're going to do is we're going to spend a 2-day going all the way across from Chicago into Seattle. So through the Cascade Mountains, up to 13,000 foot, with lots of things to see and do on your journey. Once we then get you into Seattle, we're going to have 2 nights in Seattle. Have you been to Seattle?
It's home for me. Yeah.
Okay, I haven't been to Seattle. Tell me about your home.
Seattle, I can tell you plenty about. 2 days in Seattle is really a dream for most travelers in the summertime. It's a beautiful place to be in the summers in particular. We have the new Great Wheel attraction, which is like the London Eye, a little smaller version of the London Eye, right on the Seattle waterfront. Gives you a spectacular view over not only the city, but also Elliott Bay, which is the bay of water that Seattle is situated on. The EMP, which is the arts museum dedicated to the history of music that Microsoft founder Paul Allen has built at the Seattle Center, is a must-see attraction for sure. The Space Needle, of course, is just steps away from that, and that has a revolving observation deck that gives you a 360-degree view of the city. Lots and lots to do. And Pike Place Market is another very famous place to explore.
Brilliant. You've sold it to me already, Bill. But then we get excited. Next part is now your bag. We're going to board the MS Westerdam for a 7-night Alaska cruise. Do you want to go through the itinerary and what are our guests going to actually see?
Well, all of our cruises, whether they depart from Seattle or Vancouver, start out with a day at sea, which is a lovely way to start an Alaska vacation. You know, before the age of jet travel, everybody who went to Alaska, including the Klondike Gold Rush stampeders, which really were responsible for colonizing the land up there back in the last days of the 19th century, traveled up the Inside Passage. So your first day is at sea.
So can I? Yeah. So at sea, we'll be going up the Inside Passage. Is that correct?
Yes, we're going up Alaska's Inside Passage, and it's a great day to explore the ship, book a spa appointment, just kind of get comfortable, get to know the shipmates, and of course, with our ships being a little bit smaller, it is very reasonable that you'll make some very good friends. There's a lot of intimate spaces, and you can be as anonymous or as social as you choose to be. And then the next day, you'll wake up in Juneau, Alaska, which is the state capital.
Oh, I didn't know that. I was going to crack a joke, but you just beat me to it.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
As you cruise north, one of the things I love about that day at sea is you watch the scenery around you, and the mountains get bigger, and the signs of civilization get fewer and farther between. And then the next day you wake up and you'll start maybe to see icebergs floating along the side of the ship, small ones, just because you pass fjords that have glaciers at the head of them, and the icebergs kind of flush out into the Inside Passage, and you really know you're in Alaska. You're very likely to start seeing whales, eagles everywhere you look. I challenge you to turn around in a full circle and not see a bald eagle on the deck of the ship. And then you'll arrive in Juneau, which is the first port of call and has a myriad of opportunities for adventure.
Okay, kind of give me the top 3 things to Juneau.
Okay, top 3 things in Juneau. Well, #1 has to be whale watching, guaranteed whale watching. There's very few places in the world that have the opportunity to guaranteed to see whales, in this case humpback whales.
Is that all season? Because generally, from my experience, if you want to go whale watching, you generally go May to June, right, and bears are July to August.
That's the remarkable thing. The humpback whales have got life pretty well figured out. They spend all winter in the warm waters of Hawaii, and then they come up and spend the entire summer season in Alaska. These whale watching excursions guarantee whale sightings every single day of summer. Okay, so whale watching, #1, not necessarily in this order. Another one that comes to mind that's obviously iconic Juneau is helicopter anything. You can just go helicopter flight seeing to start with, or you can take that same helicopter, land on a glacier, and there's a waiting dog sled team there to take you on a dog sled adventure, even in the middle of summer. Truly a lifetime experience. And Probably the third one would be something involving the Mendenhall Glacier. It's one of the only drive-up glaciers in North America where you can literally drive right to the face of the glacier. And that's sold in combination with lots of different activities like rafting and kayaking and just going to the glacier and back if that's all you choose to do.
Kind of also, when I went to Juneau, generally if you go July or August, the bears are plenty, aren't they? They're normally sort of salmon fishing and hooking them out. Is that true?
The bears are plenty. I wouldn't say that's a place where you're most likely to see bears. I think Ketchikan would be the place that I'd recommend that. That comes up later in the itinerary.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so we've sort of covered Juneau. So next day, where are we going next day?
Next day you have a full day in Juneau, and then we cruise overnight. And the next morning, and overnight is relative in Alaska, of course, the lights are on almost all summer long, right? So even at 11 o'clock on the deck, in the evening, you're likely to see plenty of what's going on around the ship. But the next morning, at around 8 a.m. in the morning, we arrive at Glacier Bay. And right at the mouth of Glacier Bay is another very likely place to see whales. It's a very common place to feed. So I always encourage people to get up even before you actually enter the bay, because that's an excellent chance to see humpback whales from the deck of the ship. We pick up a national park ranger and we spend the entire day cruising Glacier Bay National Park. You know, Holland America was cruising Glacier Bay before it was even a national park. And because of those grandfather rights, if you will, we have more permits to visit, which means that it's included on almost every itinerary that we offer. And there's no question it's the world's premier destination for glacier viewing all day long. Every time you come around another headland, there's a river of ice spilling into the sea. Sea otters and seals and whales and bears on the beach, it's all very common.
Fantastic. Okay, kind of that sold it to me. As I say, when I went, I absolutely loved the glacier. I was very fortunate. I went with a different cruise line. Apologies, but I was fortunate enough to be invited to the bridge. Oh, yeah. So literally, I got very, very close. I think they've stopped doing that now. So, but no, I absolutely loved it. So, where's our next port of call?
Well, next port of call again. We cruise overnight, but it's a very short distance to Sitka, Alaska. And right. Sitka is most famous probably for its Russian heritage. It was the Russian capital when Russia. You know, we didn't purchase Alaska. The U.S. didn't purchase Alaska from Russia until 1867. And until then, for the last couple of hundred years prior to that, it was a Russian settlement. Fur trade really drove that interest of Russia in Alaska for the seals and the sea otters in particular. And Sitka was their capital. So rich with Russian heritage, lots of excursions that feature that. There's a raptor rehabilitation center, so you can go to this place and see bald eagles and owls and hawks that are being rehabilitated for release into the wild. And the other thing that Sitka has to offer is it's on the outer coast of the Inside Passage, so lots of marine wildlife opportunities. Whales, sea otters, this is the place where you're guaranteed if you go out on the water to really see the sea otters.
Brilliant. Okay, that sounds fantastic. Next up.
Next stop is, again, cruise overnight, and you spend the day in Ketchikan, Alaska. Ketchikan is known as the first city because it is actually the southernmost in the Inside Passage of all those that we're talking about. And it formerly was known as the fishing capital, salmon fishing capital of the world, and it's still the best place. If you want to go salmon fishing, do it in Ketchikan. But what's even more iconic as a cruise ship visitor in Ketchikan today is to do, I'd say, the native heritage and culture of the Inside Passage is very rich. It's the oldest North American inhabitants came across the Bering Land Bridge. I like to describe Alaska like, I guess I'm going to do it with my right hand here. This is the Inside Passage,
yep.
Southeast Alaska. These are the Aleutian Islands that extend toward Russia. And that's the land bridge that the first North Americans came across on. And their totem pole art is very evident in Ketchikan. And the last thing I'd mention in Ketchikan is get on a seaplane and tour Misty Fjords National Monument. Spectacular flight seeing. I always recommend getting up in the air at least once on an Alaska cruise, and that's probably the place to do it.
Okay, I actually agree with you on that. When I went, I had my 10-month-old son, but I had 200 guests on there with me, and literally some of them were literally doing 2 excursions a day. They were coming in absolutely shattered, but literally said, I've done this, I've done that. And the one tip I would have given, if you're going to go up in the air, Misty Fjords is apparently going to be absolutely breathtaking. So we've now got one last port of call before we get you back to Seattle, which is?
Yes, and before we move to Victoria, which is the next port, I mentioned earlier that Ketchikan is also the place to go bear viewing. There are several opportunities to take bear excursions, whether it's by bus or by flight and by boat. There's combination tours that include bear viewing. That's typically best in the later part of the season, the last half of the season. But moving on to Victoria, which is our last port of call. We're there in the evening on the last day prior to our arrival back in Seattle. And probably the most iconic thing to do there is something involving Butchart Gardens. The beautiful gardens just north of Vancouver are probably the most beautiful show gardens in North America. And they're close at hand, either that or just wandering around Victoria.
Okay, brilliant. You sold Alaska to me. So I'm going to quickly have a recap. So the package we're putting together, we're going to fly you into Chicago, do 2 nights in Chicago. We're going to do Amtrak train across to Seattle. That's on a full board basis. 2 nights in Seattle, and then a 7-night cruise going to them wonderful destinations. We have dates running from the 1st of May to the 18th of September.